All right, let's get started. So first, welcome everybody to the session review of regional studies, discussion of aims and scope, and publishing tips. So today, Tammy and I are going to discuss some statistics, some material about review of regional study, and also we talk about aim and scope and publishing tips. So I'm going to share my screen first. I'll talk about some introduction for review of regional studies, and then Tammy is going to take over and talk about aim and scope and publishing tips. Feel free to ask us any questions. Once we won't have a very long presentation, and after the presentation, we'll open up for questions and discussion. All right, a very brief review for review of regional studies. I listed here our general information, our ISSN and print ISSN and electronic SN. We started publishing in print from 1970 and electronic 2003. Our publisher currently is Scholastica. And here's the journal website, and Southern Regional Science Association is our sponsor, and we publish 3 issues per year, and for each issue we roughly have 5 to 7 papers. Our general audience are academics. Currently, Tammy and I are the editors. Tammy is from University of Dallas, and I'm from North Dakota State University. In editorial board, I listed the link here. Feel free to go check the editorial board members. Some review process for review of regional studies. Last year, our acceptance rate was 26%, and our review process are double-blind peer review, which means the reviewers of the manuscript do not know the identity of the authors, and the authors do not know the identity of the reviewers. And we typically invite 2 external reviewers, and there are some exceptional, but typically we invite 2. And the average time from submission of a manuscript to the first decision in the past is 2 to 3 months. So we first give 2 months for the reviewers to send us back the review report. And then Tammy and I need another around 1 month to make a decision. And starting from January 2021, January this year, we decided to speed this up. So we shortened the review time for the reviewers to just 1 month. So which means in the future, the average time from submission to first decision would be around 1 to 2 months. And also the average time from submission to publication in the past is averaged 12 months. And in the future, our goal is to shorten it to around 9 months. The website for submission, we only accept electronic submission, and this is our submission website. And the source for publication guideline, we follow Chicago manuscript style. And approximate length for the manuscript in double space is around 21 to 25 pages. So this is just an average. Apparently, if your paper is longer or shorter, there's no problem. And the other thing I want to mention here is the journal does not have any kind of fee. It does not have any submission fee, review fee, or publication fees. It's completely free. And the last benefit of the journal is it is open access, which means your article, once it is published, it will have a very broad readers audience from all over. And the university, the researcher, doesn't need to have subscription in order to read your papers. It's completely open access. All right, I'm going to give it to Tammy. Tammy is going to continue and talk about the aims and scope.
Great, thanks, Lei. We have engaged in the past few months on a revision of our aims and scope. And right now, this is not finalized. We are open to comments, but we hope to finalize it in the next month or two after the annual meeting that we're in today, based on feedback. So why are we revising the aims and scope? Well, several reasons. Most of them is sort of good housekeeping. Our current aims and scope is fairly brief, and we feel it's not adequately descriptive. And when we are needing to reject a paper because it doesn't fit, we feel that it's important for us to be a bit more clear about what we would consider the right fit to be. Also, we are applying, or in the process of applying, for indexing in the Social Citation Index. And this process takes usually a number of years, but some of the more difficult steps at the end of the process is making the argument that your journal has some unique coverage that warrants inclusion in the index, so that it's distinctive from the other journals already included. And so we believe our journal is, for many reasons. One, the fact that there's no fees and we have quick turnaround time and it is open access. Those are huge benefits. But we also need to make the claim that we are disciplinarily distinctive, that we're providing a publication outlet that is of enhanced value compared to those already in the index. So to examine this, we took a look at all the other journals in the index currently with regional science in the title, as well as all the journals that are sponsored by a NARSC affiliated association. And that got us to 7 journals that we felt are the ones that are most likely to have similar coverage as us. And we reviewed their aims and scope to kind of understand where the areas were thin, where there were kind of fewer publication options. So next slide. Okay, there we go. And so we identified 3 primary areas of thinness. First is many of the similar journals focus on economics and geography. And if you look at the papers we've published, many of ours do as well. But our intent as an organization and as a journal has always been a bit broader than this. We wanted to make that explicit. There are many fewer journals that mention social sciences more generally, that sort of roll the welcome mat out to more diverse disciplines that I think most of us consider to be valid contributions to regional science. Also, few of these journals in our group specifically mention policy in their aims and scope. We know many do publish policy papers, but it's not a particular mention in many of them. And there are very few outlets currently for publishing studies where local context or very local policy is evaluated. There's generally historically been a preference for representative large scale inquiry, and especially in the policy realm. People are looking at reproducibility and external validity, which remain important, but more nuanced evaluation has also been increasing in importance in the field. And we wanted to make sure that we also are welcoming these sorts of publications or such a work, that they have a publication outlet. And I think we can kind of scope out some unique ground here. We're trying to caution that looking at local, very contextually driven studies does not mean they lack rigor. So we want the rigorous studies that do this sort of work. And right now, those studies, from my experience, are still relatively difficult to publish in other journals. So we feel like this is an area where we can actually contribute in a significant way. So what I have here is the proposed a revision to our aims and scope. And we've already received some comments through the course of this conference. And so we'll likely tweak it a bit before it comes out. But I'll just take a moment and read it to you. I know we could all read our screens, but the Review of Regional Studies publishes papers of interest to a wide array of social science disciplines in which the spatial dimension plays a fundamental role. This includes papers that seek to theoretically or empirically examine the spatial dimension directly, as well as papers for which the spatial context is of crucial importance for interpretation and inference. Robust quasi-experimental policy analysis at all geographic scales, including analysis of regional policies and very local programs, as well as papers in which multiple disciplines overlap and contribute to our understanding of the spatial dimension, are all of interest. We actively seek quality submissions and endeavor to provide a prompt and thorough double-blind peer review for all manuscripts submitted. The Review of Regional Studies is provided as a service to the scholarly community by the Southern Regional Science Association. We publish high-quality research and provide for wide dissemination as an open access journal with no fees of any kind. Next. So I just want to point out the kind of key contributions we tried to put into the aims and scope to address those areas where the other publication outlets were a little bit thin. There were fewer places to publish. So this slide details the language that's really focusing on a interdisciplinary focus, something away from just mentioning economics and geography. While we fully expect that those will be principal areas of contribution to the journal going forward, we would like to, like I said, roll out the welcome mat and make sure other disciplines know that they are invited as well. So this is easy. The word policies is now in our aims and scope, which is just surprising to me that the others don't mention it, but so now we have it very explicitly in ours. And lastly, lots of language here to try to get at those more local studies, to emphasize that external validity is not a criteria for publication here. And especially when you're thinking about policy analysis, that's often a criteria that people use. So we want to recognize that context is increasingly recognized as an important central feature in many research questions. And so when the spatial context is that piece, we believe it should fall under the umbrella of the review of regional studies, and very local program analysis is often excluded from other policy journals, as I mentioned before. We also believe this can hit on an emerging area in equitable evaluation, which is sort of a thing that's been being pushed forward for a number of years now, but it's gained a lot of traction in the wake of the past year and the things that have gone on socially and culturally in the United States. Equitable evaluation is just that, evaluating very local, contextually important policies rather than opting for kind of the larger policy program evaluations that kind of meet the average needs, but maybe overlook the needs of certain groups that then get understudied. So we wanted to set up the journal to be a possible publication outlet for these types of studies that are kind of emerging with a new level of emphasis. Okay, so now publishing tips, and these are really, I think, for people, more junior, beginning their career pathway in this area. But Lei and I continue to learn from the articles we get submitted and from some of the great reviewers that we get. I know I've picked up a few things like, oh yeah, I should do that next time I review a paper because it was helpful to me as an editor. So we just wanted to share a few things. One of the biggest challenges we see in some of the papers submitted is just a general lack of proofreading. So we really encourage, if you're going to submit your article anywhere, make sure that that's done, because you could have great methods and a great overall workable manuscript that will get rejected simply because the proofreading has not been done such the manuscript cannot be well understood. And some reviewers are certainly more kind in trying to deal with these errors and still trying to understand, others are not. So that's an easy thing. Once we do post our new aims and scope, we encourage, if you are submitting something that you think is particularly relevant to one of the areas we sort of tried to roll the welcome mat out for you in the aims and scope, please point that out to us. Sometimes it's harder for us to see those. And certainly one of the things strategically with our aims and scope is to point out areas where other regional science journals perhaps are not emphasizing, and we would like to emphasize those. This will help us as we move towards getting listed in the Social Science Citation Index. And so point that out to us. That will help us a great deal, and it may help us to consider who your reviewers are in light of that focus area. We can find somebody else that is in that focus area. Sometimes maybe your focus area is more methodological, so your keywords don't necessarily hit on that. So feel free to point that out to us. A new feature that Lei and I have just added is we are accepting and requesting reviewer recommendations when you submit a paper. We emphasize that we will not just blindly use these. We encourage you, please, to abide by the highest ethical standards in recommending people that you have not worked with that can be objective. But we will, if we do use one of your recommendations, we will certainly also do our due diligence to verify that, to the best of our knowledge, that is true. But we also may use your recommendations to as an illustrative of the type of scholar that you might be recommended as a good reviewer for your article. So even if we don't accept, use your names you recommended for SAY, they provide additional information to help us move your paper to the right type of reviewer. So this reviewer recommendation is very common in some other fields. And I think overall, I've heard from other people and editors that it can be very helpful for a variety of reasons, not necessarily just blindly taking those recommendations. So we really appreciate thoughtfulness in terms of that. Quality, we are not a top tier journal. We are a good journal. So one of the things that I think about oftentimes when I see the types of papers that are really successful is you can't always control the quality of your data, but you certainly can control the quality of what you do with your data. And that includes everything from using the best available methods to also not overselling what you can do, being very honest in terms of interpreting your results and stating exactly, what we can learn from this without overreaching. I think that's really crucial and something to always keep in mind. Sometimes you can turn a paper into much more of a gem by backing off the expectations for that paper and really just being very honest about it. And so I encourage, I think a lot of times, particularly early career investigators really want to shoot for the moon. And so they tend to overreach in what they're trying to do with some very limited data on the front end. Those can still be good papers. They just need to be thought about honestly and presented honestly. Next. And I think this is our last slide. So the literature review, some other common problems I've seen is very non-updated literature review. Sometimes this is hard, Lei and I have a paper about COVID and the housing market, and every time we submit that, by the time it gets into a referee's hand, it's already outdated. So we understand that, but other times, if all the citations are badly out of date, that is a problem. And also making sure the literature review is sufficiently broad, but also correctly focused. That's a common mistake. And I think sometimes it's because the literature review is written early in the process, and then you kind of work through the data and we get to the discussion and conclusion, and maybe the process went a little different direction. So I encourage, this is something easy to fix, but sometimes the referees pick up on it and just get disenchanted from the get-go. So it's an easy thing to get right to help really increase your odds. On the methods, I encourage consideration of the theoretical motivation. We all know this is what should be there. A lot of times I see papers where people think they can just hide. They talk about what they can do and ignore what should be done. That's always a mistake. Again, it gets back to knowing the limitations, just being very honest about it. That's how, in my opinion, papers really contribute to the literature, and papers we're looking for, trying to hide it. Sometimes you get lucky and can squeeze it through. But Lei and I, we're working on this, and our reviewers often, they'll catch it. And the discussion and interpretation, again, honesty, lay your limitations out clearly, don't overreach. Oftentimes it's funny, being honest and exposing the limits, it can make a paper much higher quality than it was when those things were trying to be hidden. So I know that sounds counterintuitive, and there is an art to how you do all of this, but just kind of things I've observed and seen the papers come through. Is that the last slide, Lei? Oh, one more. Oh, reviewer tips. Yes. So this is great. The reviewers, thank you. Anybody that's reviewed papers for us, greatly appreciated. It is always helpful, those reviewers that send a really brief letter to the editor with just a 1-paragraph summary, kind of like, if you caught me in the street, what you would tell me about that paper. That's super helpful. That's something I've actually started doing myself when I do reviews that I did not do before. And separating your recommendations into major and minor points is very helpful for the editors. I think it helps whenever we send the paper back around, especially when I revise and resubmit. I will usually do my check to make sure, at least the best that I could tell, that the major points were fully addressed, or I wouldn't send it back to you. So if you're able to do that and kind of pinpoint what are the key sticking points for you as a reviewer, I will do my best as an editor to not waste your time with further work if those things aren't addressed, at least from what I can see. And then I encourage, if you're a reviewer, don't select revise and resubmit unless it's really true. I mean, from a personal perspective, you're going to have to read another version of that paper most likely. And if you really didn't intend to revise and resubmit, it's just going to be a burden to you. But also it's just a disservice to everybody involved, right? So sometimes I think we feel guilty for saying reject, but sometimes it's the kindest thing to do, and give comments. And as editors, Lei and I are both really committed, especially if we get comments or see things that's helpful. We share that with the authors. I mean, our goal here is all to support each other. But sometimes the kind move is to reject a paper and tell people why. And certainly communicate with your editor if you need more time. I always grant it, but what's hard is when somebody just doesn't communicate and I don't know, and then I have to go find another reviewer or wait, and then I end up with 3 reviews because it was, you were just late. So we really appreciate the communication in any form. Is that it now, Lei? One more. So this is our thank you slide. So this other regional science association sponsors RRS, and the fact that it's open access and with no fees, I think that's underappreciated. That's huge. Most open access journals charge a hefty fee. And many non-open access journals these days all charge fees. So, and also many referees and our authors for sharing your work with us. Please encourage your colleagues and collaborators to submit to review regional studies. We're a great outlet, I think, especially for those papers that aren't going to go to a top tier journal. There's a lot of advantages here. And I think that we aren't known as well as we should be in terms of a place to consider for certain types of papers. Now I'm done. So we would like to open up the floor to questions, comments, or discussion. Really, feel free.
Tammy Lee, I have both a comment and a question, and I think I already told you the comment before, but I'm actually really excited about the focus or explicit mention of the policy based research, and then also the local context, because I think that even if you just sit in presentations, that is what a lot of people in the association specialize in. And like you're saying, that we may have limited data, or we may have a data set that isn't 100% ideal, but we are doing very cool things with data and still providing insights that are very important to policymakers or decision makers. So I'm glad that that is now in the aims and scopes. One question that I had in the past, we have SRSA has also sponsored mini grants that are used for something like a workshop to get several authors that are interested in a particular topic together. And then a special issue of RRS has come out of that. Is that something that you all are aware of and interested in continuing, so that we know whether to make sure to mention it at the business meeting on Friday?
I think we're definitely interested. I was not aware of it. I have thought, especially with some of these areas of mention that are sort of newly mentioned in our aims and scope, sometimes it's really helpful to have a special issue to kind of illustrate openness to maybe a type of focus that was not normally considered, like the really local policy, even though we know we would have accepted these good quality papers in these various areas anyway. I think it's helpful, and also reaching out. I mean, this is a little more tangential, and I'm not sure what the council thinks about it, but reaching out to other disciplines that wouldn't traditionally have seen this area as somewhere that they would publish in. I think selfishly it could help the journal, because it might open up new avenues for citations and new, but I think we need to balance that with the focus of SRSA, and I'm still a little bit new to understanding, the historical focus and where people really align there. But I think we'd be interested. I don't know if Lei has more thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. We are very interested in that, particularly for any special issue that generated from the workshop, or we are pretty open to any kind of special issue anyone is interested in being a guest editor publish a special issue on a very interesting topic, we are pretty open to that.
Okay, I think the two that I think of off the top of my head was there was one on shale gas exploration where I graduated, so maybe like 2011, 2012, and then I did just edit the one on water. That was still several years ago, but those would be two examples of what came out of those workshops that we did sponsor. So I'll encourage people that on Friday that's an option that you're open to, and obviously they would run that by you as well if they were coming to us to propose a workshop.
Great.
Thanks for the information.
Yes.
Other questions?
Well, we thank you guys for coming. And if you have additional comments or questions, Lei and I are welcome. We're still getting our feet on the ground and kind of getting the journal in the shape that we are happy with, but we hope to continue to grow and expand and want to make sure we are doing so in concert with the association, so that we are serving the proper place in the mission. So